So welcome everyone to the July 21st general meeting of the Park Cities Rotary Club. I'd like to call order and ring the bell and ask everyone to rise. And I'd like all new members to also just stand and identify yourselves, and as we just meet real quick prior to the invocation and such, and just spend a few minutes just greeting everyone, and we'll go from there. Someone signed in, and this is their phone. If you're missing your cell phone, we have a phone up here. Anyone missing a phone? Mark, is this yours? That is yours? Okay, okay. They're both working. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, everyone, let's get the show on the road. And we're going to have Fred Brown come up now and do our invocation and our pledge of national anthem. So if we all take a seat, I'd appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, President Jeff. Before we go to our invocation this morning, we've got 3 concerns that I wanted to share with you, and then we'll share from the audience as well any concerns that you might have. But first of all, as was announced last week, Alan Wynn had open heart surgery this week and is in intensive care, but is doing well and is recovering in the hospital. So we'll keep him in our prayers as we go forward, too. 2 other things that I regret to inform you that Bob and Sue Patton's son, Brent, passed away on July the 13th as a result of a car accident in Plano. His memorial service will be Saturday, July the 22nd at 2 p.m. at St. Michael's and All Angels Episcopal Church. So keep the Patton family in your thoughts and prayers. And I also regret to inform you that Siobhan Abrams' mother, Muriel, passed away July the 14th. Her memorial service will be held in Cox Chapel at Highland Park United Methodist Church on Saturday, August the 19th at TPM. So we want to keep both of those families and Alan in our prayers as we go forth. Are there any other concerns that the club has this morning? No one else? Okay. Will you please bow your head with me? Let us pray silently together, each of us according to our individual beliefs, for the concerns that have been mentioned here today. Dear Lord, we pray that you dwell in our hearts today to guide our steps, our thoughts, our minds, and our attitudes. Enable us to do your will all the days of our lives. With your presence in our life, may we please you in all we say and do. Let us offer thanks to for our many blessings, for one another, and for our absent friends today. Let us be a source of hope for those in need and contentment for those who are lonely. We ask that you guide and direct our club, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to Rotary, to our community, to our country, and indeed to all countries and peoples. Bless our fellowship today and bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and us to your service. In your name we pray. Now would you place your right hand on your heart and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now our national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight all the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
There are cards being passed around today for those we mentioned earlier, so please sign those.
Thank you, Fred. And again, keep everyone in your prayers that Fred noted. And just as a side note, we did talk to Alan just prior to the meeting, and he is doing well, and I'll let everyone know. I'll talk to him later today if he'll take visitors, but he will be in the hospital for some time. Right now, I'd like to request for Happy Bucks. Anyone have Happy Bucks they'd like to speak to? Oh. There you go. Oh,
Coming to you, Fred.
I'm sorry. He's
Oh,
any Happy Bucks? No Happy Bucks
happy bucks.
today. Okay.
No takers today.
How about introduction of guests? Do we have guests today? Anyone? I know it's the summer months and it's getting a little thin, but any guests?
It's my privilege to introduce Jim Thomas. He's up from Fredericksburg, just moved up a few weeks ago, Rotarian there for 10 years, and he's already met Barb Jeffries. They've crossed paths before, and he's looking for a new Rotary Club in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Woo. Welcome. Kathy.
Do you have a guest? Kathy?
Everyone, this gentleman wandered in.
I do that often.
His name is Matt Henson. He's visiting us. He's visited several other Rotary clubs in our district. And just having been talking to him for the past 15 minutes, I really hope he joins our club. He'd be a great addition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my friend Marie Diaz is also back, and she actually invited Matt. So we have a guest inviting a guest today. So look at that.
Matt is a special guest. He's a Navy SEAL. And so last week, or when I was here, just how you guys just really emphasize and care for our veterans, I would ask him to come. So Matt is a good friend of mine and part of CEO clubs. And so last week and the other weeks that I've come, this is my third time guest. I plan on joining, just so you know. I already talked to Daniel. I invited Matt last week because he's such an awesome individual, and he runs his own company, and I just thought this group is magnificent, so I asked him to come today.
Well, Matt, you'd have a lot of company here. We got some Navy men. We got an admiral. We have a 100-year-old veteran, CC Colley, and who else do we have? That'd be great to have a SEAL. Tom Rose was a naval aviator, A4 fighter pilot in Vietnam. I'm sorry, F4 fighter pilot in Vietnam. Go ahead.
I would like to introduce Greg's guest, my wife, Roselle. She's the she's the person that keeps me in line most of the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else?
And now Herb Zeeb will introduce our marketplace advertiser.
Thank you, President Jeff. Our marketplace advertiser today is Cleve Clinton. Past President Cleve Clinton is board-certified civil trial attorney, who represents family businesses and maverick risk-takers at the full-service law firm of Gray Reed in Dallas. Whether he's serving as lead counsel in one of the growing number of fiduciary litigation claims within family businesses, or advising a family in transition, Cleve's focus is always the same: achieve the client's goals, either in or out of the courtroom. When a deal or controversy requires a multidisciplinary approach, Cleve assembles a team of Gray Reed lawyers and other professionals with a perfectly matched skill set, whether it's tax, employment, real estate, construction, or regulatory, and then quarterback strategic planning and tactical execution every step of the way. Cleve takes pride in striking the perfect balance between legal strategy and the client's practical goals, all while minimizing family conflict. Help me thank Clinton for his, help me thank Cleve for his sponsorship.
Thank you, Herb. We'd like to have Greg Pape come now, speak to the podium, to the foundation.
Thank you, President Jeff. I'd like to have Roselle and Richard Gilman come up to the podium. Normally I'm up here bragging about the Rotary International Foundation, but now I have an opportunity to brag about the Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation. Two different entities. As we know, one of the things that chimes in with the Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation is your birthday. It's supposed to ring a little bell and remind you on your birthday to contribute $100 or more to the Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation. Now, many years ago, we had a wonderful Rotarian named Frank Monroe, who was president of the club and also a district governor. And in his honor, when someone contributes $750 or more, they are honored by the Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation with a Frank Monroe Fellow Medallion. And we have one in bronze, silver, and gold. So as you move up and accumulate your contributions, you're recognized with a medallion for your contribution. On my left, Roselle and Richard Gilman. Richard has handled just about everything there is in Rotary. I've known him over 30 years, and he takes Rotary very seriously. He's very dedicated. He's been a past president of 2 different Rotary clubs in our district, as well as a district governor. And so let us thank the Gilmans here today as they become a Frank Monroe Fellow.
That's what the script said.
I'd like to now call Orville Salmon up to the podium, please. Well, Orville, you're up here today because of all your dedicated service to the Rotary Club and to the Park Cities Rotary Club and to the Salvation Army. We're going to make you an honorary member of the Park Cities Rotary Club. So congratulations.
Well, this is not quite a surprise for this very hour, but I had some inkling of this a little bit earlier there. I can say to you that I'm honored beyond words to express my appreciation here. I've been a member of this club for better than 30 years and a member of Rotary for more than 50 years. So I appreciate this very much. Thank you very kindly.
And we have a few announcements to make for upcoming events. As mentioned before, this Saturday we have the Rangers game with the district. So again, who's going to the game? I know I'm going. Happy. Who else is going? Great. We got a group going. So I think I have 10 from our club going, approximately, as I understand, which is great. And again, we have a kind of a thin crowd today, I think, just because of vacation and such. But this Thursday, dinner at CAMPISI'S. If you can attend, it'd be great. Just go online and register that you'll be there. You don't have to pay yet. Just pay when you get there. And then we also, let's see here. And then Friday, September 1st, there's no meeting for Labor Day in that week. Also, so right now we're going to do our raffle drawing. And Lori, what are we up to now as far as the monies? $1,705. Okay, great. So let's have Saul. We're going to have you pull a number out of a bucket to see whoever the winner is, and then. And the last four numbers are 4590. That's it. Jill. Now, again, the way this works is that Jill will pull a card out of this slowly diminishing deck of cards, and if she pulls the ace of spades out, she wins half the pot, which, Herb, what's the number again? 1705. 1705, so it's just. Come on, Jill.
Nope.
And that is her consolation prize. So now we will call on Pat Martin, Chair of the Day, with our speaker.
Jeff, I have to say this. We have a Rotarian in the room who's been here for 50 years, and I wasn't prepared for you to tell us that, and I think we all should stand up and acknowledge. Yes. Thank you, President Jeff. It's my pleasure to introduce Saul. I'm going to mess up your name, Villasana. That's okay? Okay. Saul is an attorney with White & Wiggins, LLP. He is a civil trial lawyer and certified mediator with nearly 30 years of experience in the Dallas and regional legal community. His primary practice in areas include commercial litigation, including business and contract disputes, personal injury, insurance, and subrogation, premises liability, domestic relations, and attorney disciplinary defense. But that is not why he's here today. He also happened to have written a book about part of our Dallas history that many of us may not know much about. And me as a transplant, although I've lived here 30 years, and noticed the buildings along Harry Hines as you're coming off the tollway going into downtown, the little Spanish village buildings. So I think that's about all that's left of Dallas Little Mexico. And Saul wrote a book about that, and his family grew up there. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that. And so sit back and let's learn something about our city's history.
Thank you, Pat, and I'm honored to be here today to participate with you in your Rotary Club of Park Cities Luncheon. I want to share with you, which started out as a family project and turned into kind of a community project and turned into the entire city project. It's this book I wrote now 11 years ago, Dallas' Little Mexico. Let's see if I can do this. Give you an idea first of where this was. As Pat was referencing, it's down in the where probably you can see it most was where where the tollway empties into downtown. It turns into Harry Hines, that area there. Harry Hines being the primary area, but you can see it also went off to the north, up toward around the Katy, up toward Maple Avenue and the old Parkland Hospital. To the south, actually over Woodall Rogers, over to Ross Avenue, in that area there. And then off to the east, maybe more around the Central Track or Central Expressway. So that gives you kind of a sense of how large the area was, a large, large area. This is a kind of a slide of from the 1950s, was shooting from through downtown. And if you'll look closely, you'll see the Katy tracks cutting right through there. There's a DP&L power plant, a mill, the Little Mexico Village on your left to the bottom, the water treatment plant. Another view of it, just looking down Harry Hines, and again to the right is the Little Mexico Village and Pike Park. It's also from the 50s. Another view of it from a little higher up gives you a sense of how close it was to downtown. You know, the beginning of the 19th century, Dallas was one of Texas's largest and most important cities. Banking, insurance, cotton, and importantly, the railroads had assured Dallas a prominence in the emerging New South. Unlike a lot of other southern cities, though, there was a third ethnic mix in the elements in Dallas. That was a quickly growing Mexican-American population. The social displacement caused by the Mexican Revolution of 1910 had propelled thousands of Mexicans into American cities, including Dallas. Dallas's earliest Mexicans often first settled around the town's railroads, including the Katy, and they might found shelter and work there. Little Mexico, or La Colonia, or the Barrio, grew up around the Katy and the yards just north of downtown. There developed a distinct and vibrant neighborhood of modest homes, small businesses, churches, and schools that developed in the late 19-teens, beginning about 1912, 1913, on into the early part of the teens. And as I said, really propelled with the Mexican Revolution. My family came over in 1916 during the height of the Mexican Revolution they were fleeing the violence that they had was going on there. But the immigration also in the 1920s caused the population of Little Mexico to boom. And so by the 1930s, it was well over 15,000 people living in that area. The Spanish language played an important part in the development and growth of Little Mexico. Around the common language grew the neighborhood and the barrio, and of course, since its founding, Texas has always been a bilingual place. I mean, we always had been. But now with the revolution and labor shortages caused by World War I, Spanish brought together people who found themselves far away from home and building a new home. And there were many other little barrios or neighborhood. I don't want to kind of say that this was Middle Mexico was the oldest, but it was the oldest and the largest. There were little barrios over at the Portland Cement Plant, over at Eagle Ford, west of downtown, the Trinity Farms or Rancho Grande, on the Trinity River near what's now Inwood Village and the Southwestern Medical School. And then the old East Dallas barrio over near the Houston Central Texas Railroad Depot, kind of where the old the old Baylor Hospital now is, was the main depot of the railroad depot. Again, I referenced the revolution. This is what the people were fleeing in Mexico at that time. And it was one of the first major revolutions of the 20th century. I referenced my family coming over here. I had several older uncles. My dad was the youngest, so they were able to be conscripted by whichever army was passing through. And as you can see, that was done quite frequently, as long as you're old enough to carry a gun. It was an international war. This was part of the International Brigade. In fact, you'll see the fellow with the dark trench coat and the fedora is Giuseppe Garibaldi, the grandson of the Garibaldi who liberated and united Italy. And of course, women were involved in the revolution. Soldaderas were quite involved in working with the army and working on the trains and making sure that the soldiers were equipped and fighting themselves. This is a group of women who are showing off their wards and their arms. The immigration, as I said, really kicked up. You can see here these photographs. Most of these are from the de Gallier Library at SMU. It's just a really good collection of photographs from the Mexican Revolution. The refugees often had hard times coming across. Train was the best way to go. Fortunately, my family did come up on a train and crossed over at Laredo in 1916. This is the first picture from Dallas, which really kind of gives you a sense. This is the old Texas and Central Track Depot over in where the old Baylor Hospital is now. But you can get a sense of what it would have looked like and how busy the area was. This is where the TMP, the Texas and Pacific, and the railroad coming out of Galveston and Houston crossed. So it was quite an intersection for the railroads, and showed again the importance it was playing at that time in Dallas. In fact, the TMP, we're heading east and west. This is a wonderful old building in Deep Ellum, which just gives you an idea of what the railroads were like and how important they were to Dallas. They were all the way to St. Louis in only 23 hours. With air-conditioned cars. This is a great picture of the Katy Flyer coming around. Actually, the old Goat Hill in Little Mexico, large limestone kind of prominence there, where they have a nice big, huge, where that kind of waterfall is that you've all seen from Stemmons. That's kind of right behind there. Again, the Dallas Power Line, a coal burning plant on the background. The neighborhood that this community moved in and transformed into Little Mexico. And I want to talk a lot about neighborhood transformation. We're talking about Bonton Farms. I know one of your projects, how neighborhoods can transition and how they can go bad or good or whatever, but they do. And actually, Little Mexico was an old Jewish neighborhood. Eastern European Jews lived there before the Mexicans moved in. In fact, the Luna Tortilla Factory, which celebrates its 100th anniversary, I think this year or next year, they the fellow who came over with his mom, Maria Luna, Fernando Luna, he grew up in Little Mexico in the 1920s and 30s, and he spoke Yiddish before he spoke English. But there was a large Jewish population there. This is Izzy Weil, who lived on Caroline Street, and a Jewish commercial person, had a bakery. The Andrus grocery store on North Pearl. Of course, the Andrus family is a well-known commercial real estate family still in town. Give you an idea of how the kind of buildings were repurposed. This is an old synagogue, if you look. It became the first Mexican Baptist church, Primera Iglesia Batista, but you'll see it's actually, you look up in the windows, the top windows, you'll see the Star of David still, using it. Still, it's repurposed as a Baptist church. The churches were really important. This is the Guadalupe Church, and many of them were really important in bringing together all the churches, and the various churches are important in helping the people get acclimated, find jobs, find places to stay. Probably the largest church was Guadalupe here, about probably the 1930s. It's now, of course, been changed, moved downtown to the Cathedral of Guadalupe and on Ross Street, the cathedral for the diocese. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat things. While there were all these wonderful, kind of support services like churches and schools and all, there was the barrio also contained several industrial use properties, including junkyards, a slaughterhouse, the famous Newhoff slaughterhouse, and packing plants, the DP&L coal-fired plant I've already talked to you about, the railroads. All these conditions affected the residents' health and safety. I mean, we see this. We were talking about Bonton a moment ago here at my table, and those things were issues that were plaguing the residents at that time and still plague neighborhoods of mostly of people of color throughout the United States. But there quickly emerged, again, these organizations, including the churches, to help establish the community. This is the first park really built in the neighborhood. It was called Summit Park. It's now called Pike Park, and you will pass it if you fly down the tollway in Ariane's on your right. It's a little 5-acre urban park, but it was important for the community. It had the rec house here, actually designed by Lang and Witchell, who did many of the famous, they thought that many of the buildings in the early part of the Dallas were designed by that firm. And it's still there today. And in fact, I'll talk about how we're trying now in the 2024 bond issue for the city to get the money to bring that rec center back to its original condition. It's been locked up and kind of abandoned for a long time. They actually took somewhere along the way, they took off the second story. So the idea is to try to take it back and make it a center for the community that's developing, has transitioned and developed down in that area now, the Hardwood District, and that it's called, and the Uptown area. It's another photograph of the rec center at Pike Park. And this is a photograph right after it was built. At that time, before they rechanneled the Trinity River, the river was up close to it, just down up to your left. They have these large concrete embankments kind of keeping everything up there. You can still see those to this day. The Pike Park also was the center of many, many celebrations. This was from 1926. It's a July 4th celebration in Pike Park. One of the things that was really important was the community began to really adopt their new country, started to participate in civic activities. So this gives you a sense of taking from probably the top of that building in Pike Park, looking toward downtown a little bit. And this is another photograph, again, of Pike Park. This is a JCC celebration, Mexican Independence Day celebration from 1928. And again, you can see the American flags. Again, you get a sense of the housing stock there, small houses on small lots, but kept up. And they'd been there working on those for many years. In fact, when I was growing up, there were several garden clubs in Little Mexico, kind of working and maintaining the properties all over the area and competing, of course, for their best gardens. This is from 1926. I'm sorry, 27. This is a JCC celebration, and you can see the Queen in her court and everyone dressed up in their finery. Again, the Pike Park Rec Center right behind them. There were several civic organizations. I think this is one of the veterans groups that came back from World War II. And this would have been the elementary school, one of the schools attached to the Presbyterian Church in Little Mexico, where my cousins went to school there. I went to school to another one where it moved. The first Boy Scout troop was started by the Methodist Church in Little Mexico. This is the Exploradores, probably around the late 1930s, early 40s. The Wesleyan Center, which was in Little Mexico, right behind them. That's my home church, actually, was Emmanuel Methodist Church. This is Emmanuel Methodist Church. It was on Harwood. And you can see, again, it's a small house. If you look real closely, you can see that in that crowd, this is from the 40s, you see the soldiers who are in their uniform from World War II, and they're amongst the crowd there. Primera Iglesia Bautista, this is their second location, the Baptist Church. a Assembly of God on, which was also North Harwood. You can see this is probably from the 1930s. And while there were schools attached usually to all the churches, there were also the public schools were also played a part, at least certain ones of them. This is the old Cumberland Hill School on Ross, near the Adolphus Hotel. This is where most of the kids from Little Mexico who went to public school would have gone to school. It's also important too because it's one of the first really adaptive reuses of an old building. I mean, this is a simple old, vernacular schoolhouse, little red brick schoolhouse, and yet William Clements, when he came, put his drilling company in Sedco, he took it and redid it and saved that building. It's a beautiful. It's one of the first ones that they did an adaptive reuse on a great building, and it's still there today, and it looks great. St. Anne's School, I have kind of a special connection with because here it is in 1920, probably 28, 29. It was built in 27. And it was attached to the Catholic Church, and it probably saw, like the church, thousands of weddings and funerals and all types of different kind of events going on there. So the St. Anne's School was a very important property, and I'll get into. We were able to save it. This is what it looks like today. And it was a kind of an interesting thing. Back in 1999, the alumni approached me and said, can we save the school because the diocese wanted to sell the property off. And I said, well, we'll try. And I thought maybe just be a few weeks of doing this pro bono work for them. And it took 9 months later, we were able to save the property. But I was telling Pat, the Dallas Cawthorn, I think, came here last month and spoke to you. His dad, Willie, was one of the many lawyers and land use people who the diocese hired to oppose landmarking the building. And what we were able to do for the first time on the St. Anne's property was take the landmark ordinance of the city, a brand new ordinance, which said we could landmark the property even if the owner disagrees, in which we use that to landmark the property. That's how it looks today, the back part. This is the old Dallas High School, which is downtown. It's also had an adaptive reuse. That's how it looked, just was kind of up and about ready to fall down. That's it today. Wonderful, wonderful old building they got the inside and saved the shell. That was the high school for most of the kids, public school in Little Mexico. Now, there were the businesses, and my family was involved in the businesses in Little Mexico, mom and pop grocery stores, the filling stations. They were dozens and dozens of them. In fact, this is the flyer for the 16 celebrations from 1950. There were like 40-some pages, dozens of different businesses that bought little little ads in it and everything from grocery stores, bowling alleys, hair salons, you name it, cafes, bought little ads in that. And again, the primary location for these, Pike Park. I mentioned the businesses. This is taken in about 1910 in Kaufman County. This is the Cuellar brothers before they moved to Dallas and opened El Chico. And here, if you've never seen a cotton field, that's a cotton field. And they're in the business part of the cotton field right there. They went on, of course, to open the El Chico restaurant. The first one here was on Lemon. They're the brothers here, and not in their cotton picking uniform anymore, and that's their mother. And they went on to, and some of you may see in the background, you may know John Cuellar. He's back, the tall fellow there in the back. He's a good friend of mine. And now, so from the cotton field to Nancy and Mr. President Reagan's house at the White House, catering them in just a few generations. Well, only one generation. Many of the other, this is another example of some of the small stores, the Mongaraz store, the wonderful little stores, the Colonial Bakery, which is one of the primary bakeries and one of the best bakeries in town there. And they used to fight in the old days, you know, you might have a grocery store like the Mongaraz's did or the Villasana's did, but what you really wanted was a good baker. And they would try to steal each other's baker all the time because that was what really was very important, is to have the good baker. The Corsa El Phoenix Cafe is still there, you know, under different ownership of the Martinez's. Founded that in 1918. This is an early photograph of it. That's the inside. That's the ballroom. In the 30s and 40s, they had a big ballroom in there. That's all kind of gone now, but to give you an idea of how popular a place it was. This is a great shot. It's looking down Harry Hines, or Turney it was called then. You can actually see, if you look over in your right-hand corner, a little tall building. That's the Magnolia Building, the Flying Red Horse, to give you your bearings on it, to the right and the horizon. The Villasana grocery stores are on the left, with a bread truck in front, of course, which is important to have. And that was my family's little grocery store. The Villasana filling station, across the street from it, on Harry Hines. And like we do today, is a lot of times these businesses would sponsor athletic teams. The Villasana baseball team. This is the 1936 photograph. A wonderful. One of the guys, Mr. Rojas, the tall guy on to the right, he went on to do minor league ball, so it's important. La Festival Theater. This was the old little theater on Maple, a wonderful old building. One of the first places before the Dallas Theater Center, where they had. It was torn down, unfortunately. It didn't survive the wrecking ball. Another photograph looking at Little Mexico when they were paving Harry Hines and doing improvements. In 1940, they got money from the federal government to put in, the city was going to fix it up because they needed to get people from downtown to LaField, the new airport. So they had to go in and do a lot of infrastructure work. So thanks to the WPA, we have these photographs because they wanted to show what they were doing. They were actually doing their work, putting in lines and everything like that. But that gives you a sense of the small businesses. The Alonso grocery store on the right with the Metzger's milk, and the big Dallas power plant again in the back. There was always a kind of a tie with Mexico. We never really lost that, and we've been connected in many ways now for hundreds of years. This is President Obregón, who came to Dallas. And I had to cut him out, but the governor's there too. This is about 1928. And you'll see he came and spoke in Dallas at one of the parks. And he only has one arm because he lost it in the revolution. And he would always joke that the Mexican people trusted him and kept voting him into office because he only had one arm so he could steal less. So that's what the labor unions were important. This is one of the big labor meetings in Dallas at the old City Hall over on Harwood. This is about 1936. Another picture of another convention of labor workers in Dallas. The war was important because in many, many ways. You had folks going off, men and women, to fight in the war. Many of them were not even citizens. My father didn't get his citizenship till he was in Paris in 1945, toward the end of the war, where he got it naturalized. But many of the men and women went off from Little Mexico. This is Joe Nunez. This is Nita Martinez, who you might remember was on the city council, the first Hispanic on the city council. So this is her brother. He was killed in France. This is Dora Martinez. She was an Air Force nurse. She retired, I think, as a lieutenant colonel. This is Julian Saldivar, who was one of my pediatricians growing up. This is him taking it easy in the Philippines before the Japanese took it over. And he spent all of the war in Japanese prisoner of war camps. And so he was kind of a bit of a hero, real involved with the Mexican Chamber of Commerce when it developed after World War II. Alfred Martinez, you might have even seen him down at the El Chico, or the El Phoenix. He actually did the door there for many, many years. This is him in his uniform, his Air Force uniform. And I can't talk about World War II and the men and women from Little Mexico, and eventually my father, Luis Villasana. Here he is, he was a combat medic in World War II in Europe. This is December 1944 in the Battle of the Bulge at Malmedy, Belgium. And it's just like any little town. It had lots of fun and games. Here's some little people just enjoying the city. Some kids just kind of enjoying the community back in the 1950s. But things began to kind of change in the 1960s. You had leaders like Aldelfo Callejo, Frank Hernandez, Dr. Anosimo Hernandez, Rene Martinez, Trini Garza, who was the first Hispanic on the school board. all began to come together and work toward certain reforms because at that point there were no city council people, there were no people on the school board, nobody on planning and zoning, important kind of things which we kind of take for granted. So they worked for primarily single-member districts to be able to pull together and get people elected, and that was a big important thing, and you used to begin to see that happening in the 60s and 70s. In fact, Frank Hernandez, a friend of mine, the first judge in Dallas County, here's being sworn in by Sarah T. Hughes, Judge Hughes, you might remember, swore in Lyndon Johnson. Now, this is 50 years ago, this month, in fact, next Monday, 12-year-old Santos Rodriguez was murdered by a Dallas police officer who was questioning him in the back seat of his squad car and playing Russian roulette with him, blew his brains out. And so it caused a stir, understandably, and weeks of demonstrations, and weeks of meeting with City Hall and City Council people, the Chief of Police. And we're actually commemorating next week a variety of events, which I'll talk to you more about later, trying to honor Santos and his family. The police officer went on, was convicted. It was the first conviction of an on-duty police officer in Texas ever for murder. And interestingly, only just a couple of years ago, there was another police officer, on-duty police officer, convicted of murder of a Balch Springs police officer. You might remember that. It took another 40-some-odd years for that to happen. And the civil lawsuit brought against that Balch Springs police officer, they just won a $21.6 million civil verdict against that officer. This is photographs from that demonstration in 1970, summer of '73, on this old City Hall on Harwood. By the 60s and 70s and 80s, though, Little Mexico was beginning to change. It had begun to deteriorate as kind of the people had moved out after the war. They got the GI Bill. They looked for better schools and different neighborhoods, especially the suburbs. You know, you didn't have to live downtown anymore. You had the Highway Act, so you had cars and highways everywhere, so you could get around. Gas was cheap. So those were the days where living in the downtown area was important. Now, of course, it's kind of turned around. People want to live downtown, and that's one of the transitions you see with Little Mexico. Now you have high rises and people walking their poodles and all that, and it's kind of different. But now people pay. I think Little Mexico uptown has the highest commercial rents anywhere in the city. But this gives you, again, so they begin to deteriorate. This is one of the last homes, actually owned by my cousin, who had a store, the Villasana grocery store, that opened in 1932. It just closed in 2020. This is the Villasana Cafe. It's actually the old Matitos, which was, you can kind of see, was actually a home. They just built something on the front of it. Of course, nowadays you have empires like the Ojedas, which were moved out on Maple. This is kind of what Little Mexico looks like, kind of sort of now. You see the buildings in the background, the old retaining walls from when they did the infrastructure work in the 40s. This is a showing of the demolishing of the last houses there. That's what's left of my cousin's store. The bulldozers. This is looking down Harry Hines, kind of like that photograph from 1940, same view, and you can see the difference today. Now things have changed, obviously, since then. We've got people, Hispanics make up 41% of the city of Dallas, something like 70% of the students in the DISD. They've got people on city council, on park board, on the school board. This is the Latino Cultural Center, who I'll be speaking there actually next Tuesday night about the Santos killing and the legal issues dealing with that, along with a panel of other lawyers who deal with issues dealing with police violence. So that should be kind of interesting. Adelpha Callejo, her statue is in the Main Street Park downtown, right across from the old City Hall. Santos Rodriguez, the rec center, the old rec center was been showing you, it's actually been named for Santos Rodriguez. There it is, the unveiling of the plaque about 3 years ago. And in 2022, they actually unveiled a little statue commemorating Santos and park where he used to play in. All right, I'm going to lay some time for some questions, okay? Because I know you may hopefully have some.
Questions?
Okay. First off, Saul, thank you for being here. Very interesting presentation. I was surprised by the number of Protestant churches that you highlighted. I would have thought it would be 100% Catholic.
Yeah, everyone's real surprised when I put that out. I guess that's why I kind of overloaded with that. But it's true. They were like, every church was proselytizing heavily. In Mexico, even before the revolution, the Mormons had a big community down in Mexico. Mitt Romney speaks Spanish really well. You know, his family was down there in Big Rancho, Mormon. So yeah, there were the Catholic Church, especially because my family's experience was that they associated the Catholic Church with the monarchist kind of bold, kind of more conservative part of Mexico, because in those days it was like either you were wanting to be a republic, a liberal republic, or you were kind of still kind of tied to the monarchy, you know, in the old ways of Europe. And so that a lot of people I know shed that because of that.
To the Santos Rodriguez situation, was there much similarities at the time with the Jose Torres situation in Houston, with the police murdering another Hispanic young kid?
Yeah, I think that same lawyer may have worked, son of them might have worked on that case, but they all have some things in common. I mean, how many people have actually defended a police officer? Raise your hand. I have in court. So I know pretty well, and I understand how the police, the hard job they have, but you know, there could be bad police officers. There could be practices and customs in police work where civil rights violations are not looked into or ignored or swept under the carpet. That's typically what happens first. You always say when a police officer gets the first report, that's never the right report. The first report is never the right report. And it takes transparency with the police departments and newspapers and people like that to really kind of get to, especially in police violence, death in custody cases.
Now, unless I missed it, Anita Martinez is still living in her late 90s.
She is.
Right?
She's still living in kind of in the Preston Hollow area.
Yeah. Now, anymore? Okay. Bill's got a question. And while I'm going over, let me ask, how's La Bajada doing in light of Trinity Groves?
Yeah, I've had Trinity, this whole issue of development and what you can do. I mean, I've represented some of the neighborhood groups over there who try to work with the developers and the Trinity Groves folks. And what we do now is try to say, okay, you want helping with your zoning, right, to build this big building? Well, then you need to put together a community benefits agreement. Other communities, other cities do that. Generally with the city involved. This was just community organizations. So if you're going to build a hotel, we need to give us first dibs on the jobs there, right? Or maybe put in a grocery store too while you're at it. And then with that kind of agreement in writing, then maybe we help you with your zoning. Okay, so that's where we are now.
Gracias por su presentación. Yo tengo una pregunta.
Yes.
I'm a little confused. What would happen if you drove down there on a Saturday afternoon for sightseeing? Is there much to see anymore?
The Pike Park is still there. We're going to try to bring it back to life. Now, some of the problems with St. Anne's is there. Okay, it's now a restaurant, a nice restaurant that Harwood has put together, Harwood District, and the Luna Tortilla Factory down next to the El Phoenix is still there. But that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Now, Pike Park, we're trying to bring back. It's going to be complicated. You got to redo that building. You know, you got to make access and parking there. Okay. And one of the things is you can't even get across the street. If you try to walk across Harry Hines, you know, it's 6 lanes of traffic going one way really fast. Now, it can be done. Harvard International did put a stoplight over on the McKinnon side where their high-rises are, okay, because they didn't want those poodles to get hit, all right? So it can be done. It just takes a little, you know, doing.
Thank you, Saul Villasana.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Saul, thank you so much. In honor of your speaking today, we're going to have a book put in the elementary school at McShann Elementary.
Oh,
in your honor. Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
And with that, we're going to have Sarah Ollier come to the podium and do our 4-way test.
If you'll join me in the 4-way test, first is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Ring the doorbell.